How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good. How about you?
Excellent. I had a late night at a concert with my daughter last night. That was a lot of fun. I hear you had a great yesterday experience as well. Kind of kicking back to a couple episodes ago where we talked about running.
Yeah, yeah. Tiring and some new blisters developed and whatnot, but the knees are feeling it this morning. But yeah, I ran a 10 mile, an actual race. So thought I did actually a little better than I did. I finished in the top 20%. I thought I was in the top like 10%, but I'm being told by everyone that doesn't matter. Focus on what matters.
Yeah,
But,
well, it's all
uh,
against yourself. I mean, that's where it is. I'm never going to beat those 20-year-olds, so
oh,
ranking
I
against
so
myself is where it goes.
Yeah, I wanted to across my 10 mile, I wanted to average a 7 something pace. So I want to be under 8 because I
Yeah.
run 8 all the time, half marathons at 8. I wanted to be like a 7. That's hard when you get out to those 10 or 15-mile distances, and hard for me. And so I'm like, "Oh, wow, I did that." And it was like a 7:50. And then I saw the results last night, and there were like it was like 90 out of 600 runners. So again, top 20%. But like
Yeah.
I looked at those 80 or whatever beneath me, and I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's like beyond just training and age. It's like, these levels of DNA that are just unbelievable. Like, I mean, you had any number of guys, I think a dozen guys at the top who were like at a 5:20 pace. I've
Yeah.
never in my life broken a 6-minute mile on 1 mile. And you're,
Well,
did a 10 miler with a 5:20 pace. I mean, that's beyond,
there's elements of genetics. There's also elements of being able to do what it takes to win. In other words, one of the best compliments I've gotten in mountain biking is you ride pretty good for a big guy, and that weight makes a difference. You look at those guys that are running that pace, they're probably 60 pounds off, 80 pounds off, not
Yep.
over 6 feet. But anyway, talking about data, I've been doing a lot of data crunching recently, teaming up with Claude and my AI
Now
assistant that I've
Friday.
been
Yeah.
putting together. Friday,
Yeah.
yep. So, I mean, Claude is the underlying substrate, and she's kind of a collection of rules and other kinds of things that we put together on top, a bit of markdown files that are all accessible through Claude. So, over the past few weeks, I had an idea of looking at some of the data that we have in OwnerRes. I started looking at one of our recent efforts with Partner, our Airbnb specific but standard fees and discounts, what we did to optimize those and make it a lot easier to go in and actually set the exact kind of fee or discount. And that was a really interesting. So far, that's been just an internal only statistics to see how successful that effort was. But that gave me the taste for data and seeing what you could do with something that I would never have the time to actually go and research all the queries and put them all together and get them right. And Claude didn't get them right either, or Friday. Well, Friday is the collection of learnings basically on top. And so through that, I found that there was an iteration sequence, right? Go out, research the data, smell out where it looks wrong, write more queries, and continue down that path until you actually have something that creates answers or really creates a narrative. You can look into the data, and each little data point is kind of not very useful by itself. But once you get in and start finding which data is right, which data looks right, but actually wasn't right, you can start drawing a narrative. So then I thought about cancellation policies because this is a topic of much dispute and much discussion. And I think based on this, it became clear and also more murky at the same time. Uh, what I found when looking into cancellation policies is there's not a one size fits all. There's a lot of different things that can affect your cancellation policy, from the location, from the type of property, from the rate bucket, from the volume of bookings that you get. If you get a lot of 1, 2 nights, your high volume, you can deal with cancellations a lot better than if you are a large property that doesn't book very often. So I'll get into some of those details, but Paul, you've been in the business with the PM side for a while. What are your thoughts? What have you seen?
Yeah, this is so you showed me some of that, and it's really, really interesting. And it both made sense and it also kind of touched a nerve, I think, at times, which I think also backing up a step is something that I'm fascinated with, which is how you have to, particularly in hospitality, in STR hospitality, you have to separate yourself from this is my property, from this is, I am the owner of this house. This guest is coming into my house. They're doing things to me. They're having this kind of combative feeling of I need to make sure they can't cancel. I may need to make sure I'm protected from them. And of course, those things are true generally. But, um, opening yourself up a little bit to what is real and offering actually truly good experiences and so on, it's interesting to actually get back to the data and question yourself. And so I'm very fascinated by this. And so, some of this started also with Airbnb and Verbo. I think Booking probably too, but the OTAs have been trying to push hosts for the last year, maybe more, to open up their cancellation policies showing good data, good, credible, well-researched data and graphs and whatnot that show that if you lighten your cancellation policy, if you give people more flexible or moderate cancellation policies and say, drop more of the, stop with more of the like no refund type policies, at least where they're booking well ahead of time. And even the strict last minute 14-day type policy and expand it back to 30 days or even have I'm sorry, I went the other way, 30 days, but drop it back to like 14 so that they can cancel closer to the booking. Basically, give the guest a better cancellation experience. You actually make up for it in the long run because you get more bookings. And so, yeah, you might get a cancellation that can't rebook at the last minute now and then, but overall, people, when they are guests, when they are on the search screens and when they're booking, will click the flag for, flexible last minute cancellations allowed. They'll look for that kind of stuff first. So you'll be higher in the results. You'll get more bookings and you'll start off also with a better guest experience because the guest feels better about their stay. So there's more kind of goodwill in the air before the person even arrives at the property. And there's been some internal debates that have raged about this, both with customers, even our own internal team and the dog fooders group here, about whether that's true and to the extent it's true. Um, I feel it is and is not. I feel it is largely, but I feel like there is a niche side of the business with our larger, nicer properties that, yes, if they cancel in the last couple of weeks, there is no chance to rebook them. You have to practically give the nights away for a massive discount because you just, groups of 30 people, 3, 4 families or church groups or whatever are not going to make plans last minute most of the time. So it's, so there's like, I'm torn. And there's two sides to this, but I mostly sided and have sided with offer a better experience. It creates goodwill. You do get more bookings in the long run. Look at the big picture. So coming back to your data was kind of contradicted that a bit, or at least sought to show careful buckets and guardrails around where that's true and where it's not.
Yeah, well, first off, what you just said made me strike an interesting mental note because you were saying people go in and filter or whatever, but I was thinking about myself. I booked a lot of Airbnbs, Verbos for decades. I have never once gone in and said, hey, let me go first off filter down for people that have a flexible cancellation policy, right? I go find the property I want to stay in first. And then maybe later, if I'm like about to book it and I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, I don't quite know yet. It's never like I want the property. I don't want the cancellation policy. So that makes me wonder, like, who is actually going, like, there, if that's affecting it, there must be somebody going by that. Who is that person? What is that guest?
I think maybe just interject there. I think it's a tiebreaker parameter. I don't think anyone goes first and goes. I mean, you might get the curmudgeon or the somebody who just hates strict cancellation policy. But I think for the most part, it is if the deal overall, obviously location and dates, what matters more than that. Um, Guest size, the type of amenities, and so on. So you're right; it's down the list. Well, Verbo has famously published that there's 7 booking parameters on average that every guest makes in the STR market. There's the big 7, where there's location, guest size, location, so on, dates. I don't know if it's in that 7. I think it's probably toward the end of that 7 or even 8 or 9. But I think there are cases where it's a tiebreaker. I've clicked the button a few times where there's where there's plenty available in that spot. I'm trying to drill down a little bit.
Yeah.
I have looked at, well, I'm a month or two out. This place is flexible. This other one is no refund. And, it might draw my eyes that way. But I think you're right. It's not a primary parameter.
That's actually, I mean, I think that's a really great analysis because it informs the numbers that I saw. Actually, if you come back and think about it, the overall trend was that it's really a spectrum. It's a spectrum broken down. There's a couple of different ways to do it. And maybe the rawest kind of abstraction is dollars per night. But what you're really looking for, I think, is uniqueness of the property, size of the property, premiumness of the property, and really fungibility of the property. If your property is very fungible, there's a bunch of other similar properties in the same area. You're not really going by the uniqueness of the property. It's a apartment or condo maybe in an area that's got a lot of other things in the same location. Well, that's when you've got high volume and you can rebook pretty easily. It's not a unique place. Nobody is kind of looking for a particular other component. And that's when it comes down to that tiebreaker. And that's basically, if you kind of sum up, that's the overall trend that I saw in the data, which is for cheaper, more fungible properties, a more flexible policy, maybe even the most flexible policy, will get you the highest overall booking value. Whereas as your properties get more unique, larger, more premium, and probably book farther out, need somebody to have a larger party or being more invested, that's when it trends more towards the stricter, and to be clear, no refunds was basically a deal breaker in almost every case. That was never really a good policy that would increase value. But as you get towards the 14-day, sometimes the 30-day, that's where you would see for those larger properties a little bit higher overall value because probably they can't be rebooked as easily. They're not that kind of fungible.
That's interesting. So, what are the categories overall? You mentioned that there's Goldilocks zones. So, yeah, I'm privately in looking at the data. So, what can you explain that a little bit more? When you say low, is it just low end and high end? Are there more gradation than that? Is it different times of the year? What else did you find?
It's kind of a smooth gradient, right? Like the low end, if it's under $100 a night, that's where you're completely flexible, book, don't book, right? Cancel within a day or two is actually going to get you dramatically more. But as you move into the two, three, 400s, that's where your moderate and kind of firm policies get to be a higher value. And once you get over 500, your 500 and the 1,000, that's where your strict 14s and maybe your super strict 30s start to come into play. So it's kind of a smooth gradation as you do that. According to the data that I broke down and cross-checked with Claude and Friday, that really plays out in regardless of season, regardless of location. And actually, in some cases, it's more important seasonal. Like you on your low seasons, right? Like having a longer cancellation policy is very important. Um, Whereas it's less in a non-season, probably because you could rebook it a lot more frequently, which is interesting to see. Both Airbnb and Vrbo have recently implemented seasonal cancellation policies. So that will allow you to target those on seasons a little bit more flexibly and put stricter ones in place for off seasons where you might not be able to rebook as well.
So, okay. So, one of the reasons that this debate raged internally, and I know it has with users because we've put it out and encouraged people to think about modifying their cancellation policies and seeing how their booking traffic grows. And there's been kind of a backlash with that, or at least some conversations sideways among customers and in the forums and whatnot. Um, why then are we seeing several large OTAs make this claim? Is it because they either have a lot of the low end, $100, $200 a night, volume inventory that's just, that's inventory is just significantly higher on their sites, or do you think it's more, is it a cynical thing to just try and get people to, um, change their policies so that you're more in line with they're more in line, the OTAs, with competing with the hotel market, which of course is very flexible. I mean, the vast majority of hotels, you know, you can cancel up to 24 hours ahead of time. So, I mean, what do you think it is? I mean, some of that speculation, but any thoughts there?
I think, there might be some elements of that. There's definitely some hotel-based thinking in the market and some other things that tinge it. But I think ultimately the answer is that it is at that level, you have to create a simple marketing message, and the message is directionally correct. Probably most people are a little bit stricter than they need to be, and would do better a little bit looser, which ties back to what you were saying about overall guest experience and kind of the non-tangibles being important. Those things that you can't just reduce to a number.
Yeah, I so let's talk about that for a second because this is a big thing for my wife's company, Shenred, that has been around for almost 2 decades now, close to 2 decades. Next year, I think it's 2027 will be 20 years.
Wow.
And in what one form or another, it was named something previously, but um, this is an area, and this is actually not unlike Onerez itself. Our company and our team here, which is that guest experience and guest goodwill factor, which I think is very hard to analyze. And now that we have Resi doing all this mass sentiment analysis all the time, I'm loving looking in these numbers to see what is being produced because, of course, Resi is analyzing millions of conversations, bookings, reviews, basically anywhere where a guest is interacting so that you can get a sense and get a tone of what's actually going on, which can be hard if you don't have, everything's instant book and you're just, not really communicating very much. You got to generate words in order for Resi to see what's going on, look over your shoulder. But it's really fascinating to me because that sentiment, that let's call it happiness index, that creating happiness, we call it at Owners, um, is really underrated and it's very hard to quantify. And I think in some cases, you have to give back revenue a little bit, or you have to kind of change how you manage your business a little bit. You may be erring on the side of caring a little bit less about incidental damage, caring a little bit less about maximizing revenue in order to increase that happiness index, that sentiment. And I don't know if you're giving away the farm too much, like you don't need to. I think in certain markets with a spectacular property, great amenities, great location, and so on, maybe it doesn't move the needle much, even if someone's has strict, guardrails and structure around how they book and what goes on at the property. It doesn't matter. You're still going to get the 5 star. They're still going to be blown away. But I know for us, because we have this long term vision, and the same thing here again at OwnerRez, there is a sense that the goodwill, the happiness index is important enough to fund a little bit from the revenue side, and to loosen the rules in places where it doesn't necessarily matter, um, or even take it on the chin a little bit now and then. If there is a little bit of damage, there is something where you could invoke a rule or you could lock down more, you could sign another agreement. Um, and that part, I'm looking very much forward to seeing how sentiment analysis plays out, um, now and in the future.
Yeah, it's funny. While you're talking, I was thinking about a couple of different things that tie together in non-intuitive ways because it's one of those things where the harder you grasp on, I think the farther it gets away from you. And it's also counterintuitive because you both have to have a good to be a to deliver good hospitality to people. You have to both be very emotionally invested in the property, want to create the best experience for somebody. But you also have to be very business as usual, right? And not let snags catch you. It can't be your baby that you're worried about somebody breaking. You have to take things in stride and kind of sweep some things in the rug, like you were saying, eat it a little bit. So this is why I think hospitality is more challenging than a lot of people realize, right? To give that great experience, you have to invest of yourself, but you also can't feel personally attacked when people come in and mess up your property. Maybe you don't want to be the one doing the cleaning and seeing all of the things that happen to your property, that are actually not really too bad. The cleaners come in and rectify it. Maybe something small got broken or something like that. But you overall create a much better business, and you can sleep a lot better at night if you're not kind of obsessing over those tiny little things too. So it's a really challenging, non-intuitive thing, and I think it draws back to thinking about the directionally correct, like thinking about a lot of the different things that the OTAs have been saying. This, your not refund policies, you're kind of letting some damage fly. Like it all ties back to the same kind of concepts. If you have to, you're collapsing your fees into one rate. So you're not seeing this booking with like a bunch of different fees and then like a bunch of different chores that you have to do, even though you have a cleaning fee. Some of those things maybe case by case specific, but it's directionally correct. If you have one number, that's going to look way better than this whole itemized list of all these different things that you have to see and then try and like break down. Am I getting a good deal? Am I getting not good deal? Like here's the number. It is what it is. Similarly with your cancellation policies, maybe you're doing a credit card processing yourself, and if somebody cancels, you take 3%. Well, yes, you could do a cancellation policy to cover that, or maybe it's better to eat it a little bit and slash or increase your rates very slightly on everybody to cover that case and not have that cancellation policy, which drives into, well, if you have a cancellation fee, it's not really a no refund, it's not really a refundable policy. There is some element of unrefundability to it, and you will get penalized for that. So overall, thinking about those little things that nudge you into a really smooth guest experience and a really great feeling of hospitality, that's very important. And it's something that I'm starting to see. It starts with the first impression. Now that we have our own property and we're running it and we're seeing it, like the way people interact with you on the OTA before they even get in the property, and then the way they walk into the property, and either they have one of two feelings, right? Either the pictures didn't do this justice, this is completely awesome, like way better than I thought, this is phenomenal, and then things just start stacking, right? Like it's better and better and better, and they have this great experience. Or you've marketed it to its teeth, like to the nth degree. You've got these photos that like make it look good, but it's not really even the thing that you want. It doesn't really actually represent what it is in reality. And then they walk in and the experience gets worse and worse and worse. And they notice every little thing and it's like bad. And then this thing's out of place. And then they go run their finger over the top of the fridge or whatever. And there's dust up there. And it just kind of goes down that cycle.
100%. It's highly coincidental that you actually bring this up. I was just talking to the Shenron team about this, about the exact same thing. And you're right. The OTAs directionally are really in the right direction. I know there's maybe some people internally in our team and elsewhere in the community that would, are going to downvote, comment very angrily at this point about how that's not true or how there's been trust eroded over the years and they're trying to take control and own all the inventory. But that guest experience is very important, and collapsing it all to one fee. Yes, it all starts. I was just talking about this, how guests either tend to fall into one side or another very quickly. Either they're on your side and they're willing to overlook things early on, or they're not on your side and they start building a case early on. And the first impression, as you said, is not even when you get to the property. I mean, if you get to the property and the maintenance isn't done and the paint's chipped and it looks, then they're starting to build that case. But I wholeheartedly agree that it really starts before you get to the property. Even the things like the cancellation policy, is it overly strict without needing to be? Is it, yeah, the image is highly AI enhanced to look nothing like the actual property, and they get there, it's dim. They're willing, if they have that good experience and there's a lot of goodwill up front, they're willing to get there and go, okay, well, this overall, this is a great experience, and these people communicate well, things are clean. Okay, this light didn't work, but that could happen, right? And they're either on your side and willing to overlook things, or very quickly go the other way, and now they're very much building a case, and every time they open a door, look at something like, oh, yep, one more thing, here we go, and they're negative. So yeah, the goodwill factor, the way cancellations, in the entire early experience play into that 100%. So I think that looking at your Goldilocks zone data on where the sweet spot is relative to the house and size and the amount per night, and that goodwill factor, it's, it just comes back to having a balance, knowing, like you said, how do you separate yourself from the, maintaining the emotional and warm and hospitable connection to the property to make it a good business and to make that a good experience, while at the same time being willing to look at the data and know where your sweet spots are. And I mean, we could just keep going here. I mean, there's owners that I know who, to their own demise, will not lower their rates because I don't want that kind of guest in my house. It's like, well, you're going to get some riffraff or something. And if I lower it down to 100 a night, and you can show them all the data in the world that, look, your cleaning's covered, your taxes are covered, you're not really getting any additional type of damage or anything. That kind of riffraff argument often is untrue. Just by lowering your rate 30% during a particular season, you're not, there's no negative there, right? I mean, vacancy is by far a much worse negative overall. Um, so being able to separate yourself and see that goodwill and that guest experience, but turn the levers in a way that do help you, make more out of it. So I guess I'm just re-summarizing everything you just said, but I completely agree. And the cancellation policy is very interesting, and I think probably there's a whole series of things like this that your Gal Friday can help us expose over time as we look through it.
No, yeah, I've got a whole list, so we'll have to do an ongoing series about this for sure.